Are you a Black woman looking to learn more about mental health, how mental health issues may be impacting you, and ways that you can prioritize your well being, your wellness in this very turbulent environment? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to my channel. My name is Marissa Price. I am a Black woman social worker, healer, and educator. And this channel is dedicated to creating a safe space for Black women to share our experiences, to heal, to share resources with each other, as we are all on this healing journey, kind of navigating it together. So, with that, I will pass it to my lovely guest tonight, Camesha Jones Brandon, LCSW, to introduce herself and tell us about her YouTube channel.
Yes, thank you, Marissa, for inviting me to be a guest on your channel. So I'm Camesha Jones Brandon. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I identify as a community mental wellness change maker. I love community mental health, and I also love Black women and creating spaces for Black women to heal. And that is the work that I lead at my social enterprise, Sista Afya. And we provide mental wellness care, community mental wellness care to Black women in Chicago, and provide a wide range of ways for Black women to heal. And then in addition to that, just really building community, like how we're on this podcast together today, just really promoting the power of community support in our individual and collective healing processes. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. And then my channel. So if you go on my channel, which Marissa has tagged, I have content dating back, oh my gosh, since I started in 2017. So it's a mix of events that we've done in the past, me dabbling into series. There's a podcast. I have my Moving Beyond Burnout live stream. So it's just a mix of all these experiences that I've had building this business and this organization. So I really encourage you all to check it out and see what resonates with you.
I love that. I love that. And yes, I see y'all joining. Yes, if you're joining, please introduce yourselves in the chat so we can say hello. Hello, Yolanda. Good to see you. So happy to be here. Good. We're good to see. Glad to see you here. Yes, yes. I see the educator and Leslin as well. Hello, hello. But yes, so on my channel, I've talked about the term Black girl depression before, which describes the symptoms of depression that Black women and girls may exhibit due to the ways in which we're socialized. So, just like, can you talk about some of the unique mental health challenges that Black women face and how our symptoms may present differently than what something like the DSM, which is a diagnostic and statistical manual, which is used to diagnose mental health disorders, may lay out those symptoms? So, yeah.
When I think about what makes Black women's mental health and experiences similar, but also different than other groups of women, has a lot to do with the context in where we live and where we're located. So there is a historical, a social, a cultural, an environmental aspect that impacts Black women's mental health that I think is not captured in the DSM. The DSM is still very individualistic, as if some in ways like your mental health condition just came about, and it doesn't always factor in all those different factors that I mentioned. And so, with that, some of the experiences that Black women have with their mental health are a result of our historical context. So, speaking from an American context, our history in America, the history of our communities, the history of our families. There is the social context. So, what's happening in our social lives, in our environments, and then what are some of the cultural challenges that we may have that is not always captured. So when I work with Black women, I am looking at them in all of those contexts, which there are still even Black therapists that don't always do that as well. And it's very, very important. So some of the things that Black women experience, some of the highest mental health conditions are depression, anxiety, and traumatic stress. Those are the top three that Black women experience, particularly the trauma and the violence against Black women and girls is a lot higher than other groups. If you go and look in statistics, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's sexual assault, Black women experience and report higher incidences. So just the level of trauma, I think, is a little bit more intense, or it's different or more frequent. And I think that definitely, of course, shapes our mental health. Like one of the things that I was taught in graduate school, Marissa, you may have also heard this as well, but trauma that occurs early on in life can actually be a risk factor for other mental health conditions developing across the spectrum. So I think when we talk about Black women's mental health, like thinking about that, like if there are so many Black women and girls that are experiencing various types of trauma, that could be almost a foundation for other things also occurring. And then depression, a lot of high functioning depression I see. And I would say high functioning depression, being able to do all the things, but coming home feeling empty, depleted, isolated. And that is, I think, part of our survival, right? Like, I have to keep going. I don't have an option to stop because I have my family. I have other people who are depending on me. I have my own survival. But at the same time, I'm also experiencing all these other challenges. And then anxiety and stress and financial and economic challenges is not talked about enough. And those economic and financial insecurity and strain creates anxiety, it creates worry, instability, and those things also impact Black women's mental health that is often not talked about.
That's so true. And yeah, you touched on like adverse childhood experiences, which I have a workshop coming up on. And just like thinking about that, being a Black girl, right? And all of these, like you said, systemic factors that like compound what we may already experience in childhood when it comes to trauma and how that impacts us in adulthood, right? I think that's huge because we often don't see Black women and girls in that conversation enough. And just learning about that in graduate school, like I didn't hear about that, right? That's something I had to teach myself, the various systemic factors that may impact our mental health. So, yeah, I think that's so important. Yeah. Yes. And also, Superwoman syndrome, which I talked about on my video about Black girl depression, right? Can you share a little bit about what Superwoman syndrome may look like and how symptoms may present for Black women who may be experiencing depression?
The superwoman syndrome, also known as the strong Black woman trope, um, is a survival. It's a survival. I frame it in the lens of survival and also the lens of like esteem and capability. So the strong Black women or the super women trope, they're kind of like used together, focuses on Black women's strength and resilience to be able to persevere, to be able to overcome, to be able to do these things that may feel like almost impossible or really hard for the average maybe human to do. But what that does is it can almost dehumanize Black women,
Mm-hmm.
in that they do experience pain, they do experience struggles. Sometimes it can cause Black women to actually ignore their mental health symptoms because they believe they have to power through, because it could be a sign of weakness, or because it can be perceived as a feeling incapable. So it's like I have to do this to prove, to other people that I can, even if it may be harming me, even if I may be suffering. So some of it is out of survival, of like how I talked about earlier, like literally having to push through for your survival
Mm-hmm.
or your
Mm-hmm.
family survival, community survival. But the part around being able to address your mental health, There can be barriers with admitting it can be barriers with minimizing it, and there can be challenges with people seeing Black women's full humanity, that we do deserve care and we do deserve um, just more empathy, because we're experiencing some of the same challenges that everyone else is experiencing with their mental health.
Yeah, that's so true. Thank you for sharing that. I see a comment from Leslin. OMG, we need to talk more about high functioning depression, so heavily underrated. Yeah. And I think that's part of superwoman syndrome, right? Like taking on even more tasks, responsibilities onto your plate when you feel like you can't handle what you currently have. And you may be feeling those initial feelings of sadness come on. Some of us start to take on even more responsibilities, right? And that becomes like high functioning depression. Can I just ask you about that term and how that, like, as a clinical social worker, high functioning depression, like, does
Mhm.
that resonate with you?
Oh yeah, 100%. So high functioning depression, and I actually, there's a video on my YouTube channel, focused. The title is "When Struggle and Success Coexist: High Functioning
Ooh,
Depression in Black Women." And what I talk about in that video is that in some ways, Black women may look like they have it all together, or they are encouraged to do more and more and to be more and more. But at the same time, they are still struggling on the inside with depression. So that is kind of the I guess called the catch 22 or something like that, where
yeah.
you
Mhm,
may be successful on the outside. Like, even when I think about how youthful Black women look for a long time, right? We think about
mhm.
celebrities like Angela Bassett. It's not even fair. Like, where are her where is she? Where I need to get on whatever she's getting on. But like, on the outside we look good, but then there's also
Mhm.
terms like weathering, where we may be aging faster because of the amount of stress and pressure that we're under. And I've seen that in also context with working with Black women who are leaders, where they have these high positions, they have a lot of responsibility and worldly success. But when I talk to them, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I'm tired, I don't feel valued. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And so I think it's something that is very, very prevalent that people don't talk about enough. And I think what you touched on with the strong woman complex,
Yeah.
like, people are in strong Black women, people got that. Like, people are moving to getting to understanding that high
Yeah.
functioning depression, that's a like the next level
Yeah,
of, like, really
that's
being able
true.
to understand and make those connections.
Mhm. Yeah. So you said when struggle and success coexist. That's a
Mhm.
video on your channel. Yes.
Yep.
So please subscribe to Sister Afya's YouTube channel. But yeah, that's huge, right? Because that's one of the things that I experienced, just like in a work environment, in school. On the outside, you couldn't tell anything was going on, right? I was making straight A's, recovering overachiever. But on the inside, it's like you're struggling, right? And that's the case for a lot of us. So yeah, thank you for that, Leslie. Leslie also says, I have noticed that it looks like we are hiding in plain sight. Yeah, doing all the things and smiling because we do not want anyone to know we are suffering. That's
Yes.
so key. That's so key. Thank you. Yeah. I do want to ask how we can bring our awareness to this when we may be going down the road of having the symptoms of superwoman syndrome, how we can recognize that and maybe go in a different direction to start really tending to our mental health.
Mhm. So that's a very interesting question. And I get that people ask me that often. What are the
Mm.
signs? How do I know? What can I do, if I start to experience the superwoman syndrome, or, other common issues that Black women may experience? The first thing that I always tell people is to look at your basic functioning.
Mm.
Are the things that you are doing or how you are feeling impacting your basic functioning? So that means being able to take care of the basics, go to sleep at a decent time, like getting
Mm-hmm.
good
Yep.
rest, eating
Mm-hmm.
well, having energy, um, being able to, I mean, when we talk about depression, grooming, taking like literally the very, very basics. Like if you think about when you're 5-year-old, what does your mom tell you to do? Brush your teeth, eat your vegetables, drink water, have some time for fun with others. So if you start to see a deterioration in being able to just take care of the basics and to feel okay, that is one of the first indicators that something may be off. Also, exhaustion. So when we think about superwoman syndrome, it includes being overdoing it. It means overcommitting, over
Mm,
involvement, um, really pushing yourself to the full. I mean, to, as far as you can go or further, right? Even if you've reached your
mhm,
capacity. So I would say exhaustion is another huge indicator. um what else? Trying to think of like all the things that I have seen are indicators. Also time. How much time are you spending towards the things that are causing you exhaustion?
mm,
So if all of
mhm,
your time is being taken up by work and you barely have time to go out and enjoy life, that may be an indicator that work is the source of your exhaustion. When
mm,
I've worked with mothers, right? Being
mhm,
able to be supported by your significant other and to have a break, right? And we have, when you have children, it's a full-time thing. Like you can't necessarily just fully tap out or anything like that. But if it gets to the point where you're not able to really do much more than the basics or not the basics at all,
right.
yeah, like that is an indicator. And then if other people are saying that they notice that there are changes with you too, sometimes if people are like, "Are you okay, sis?" Or "I notice you're not hanging out with us anymore," or "I see that you're not yourself." A lot of times, other people will say something, and we may brush off like, "Oh, I'm okay. Like, don't worry about me. I'm just having a little bit of a rough time." And so listening to other people and what they're seeing as well can be helpful in knowing signs.
That's huge. Yeah, that feedback that we receive from people around us. Like, I notice you're not yourself lately, and really like sitting with that and reflecting on that. Like, are you being stressed out in these different environments? And then what changes can you make to really support your wellness going forward? Because that's the key. Yeah. I do see a question from Yolanda. My question to you is, could I still hold that trauma even though I don't remember the trauma from childhood? So, even if we're not consciously aware of the trauma we experience, could our bodies still hold those traumatic memories?
hmm So, from my knowledge about trauma, I will say I'm not the most knowledgeable about the specifics of how trauma manifests on the long term, but it there's a book called The Body Keeps Score. It's like one of those
Mm-hmm.
books that everybody tells you to read if you're going to do trauma work. But the body can hold memories and can hold experiences that
Mm-hmm.
you may not be experiencing right now. Also, trauma impacts people differently. So, like, there can be one traumatic event that happens to one person, and the same traumatic event happened to the other person, but it could affect their lives differently. So, one thing that was really, really interesting in Chicago, there's a lot of work around trauma, around violence prevention, and a lot of people were talking about ACEs a couple of years ago. I mean, that was all people were talking about. So I
Mm-hmm.
go to this panel, and one of the ladies mentioned that there are some people who experience trauma that don't necessarily need to process it because they're functioning fine, which is something that was really interesting.
Interesting.
Like, I was like, oh, so you don't think it needs to be unpacked? She said, sometimes for some people, if it's not disrupting their lives and
Mm-hmm.
it's not, if it's not causing like a lot of distress and pain, you can almost do more harm trying to unpack it than kind of
Oh,
leaving it in its space. And when she said that, I was like, that's not what they tell us in school. We're supposed to
it's
unpack,
not.
go through everything, but it makes sense in a way. So I would
Mm,
say that if you had a traumatic event that happened and you recognize it, there are two options. You can go to seek therapy and unpack it, but also like being prepared with what's going to come with that. And if you feel like, yeah, I went through this and it's not really impacting me that much, but I know it wasn't a good thing, I know it was terrible, it could you could, I don't want to say you would be okay technically because I can't guarantee that, but it may be something that you don't have to really unpack or go into because of other types of effects of it. So that was a long
mm.
answer, but
Oh no, thank you, thank you, because I've never
Mhm.
heard that before, right? Because I think like the advice is always just to go straight to therapy, right? But it's really like reflecting with yourself. Will this cause additional? Wow, I never thought about that. Will this cause additional suffering? Like you said, if you're already functioning, I'm gonna write that down. Wow, that's a viewpoint I've never heard before. Hmm,
And I
interesting.
felt the exact same way when I heard it for the first time.
Yeah.
I
Huh.
was like, wow. I was like, that's interesting. And people didn't, of course, people didn't agree with her when she shared it, but I thought it was good that she brought up a different perspective.
Mm, yes. Yes. I see. Oh, hello. Hello. Yes. And I did want to ask you about family dynamics. So, how can family dynamics and community expectations both support and also challenge Black women's mental health is we as we kind of like zoom out to the different systems at play. Family systems, community systems are also pivotal in determining our mental health. So anything you'd like to share about those things?
Yes. So, one of the beautiful things about the Black community is the Black community. Our collectivism and sharing and collaborating and supporting, it's all through our DNA. I
Mm-hmm.
believe it, I see it. It's all in us. And that is one of the beautiful cultural values that has never left us. And part
Mm-hmm.
of it, I think, also had to do back to we were all we got. We all we got. We know if all these other people in America go and X us out, we know how we're going to work together. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the places that I've seen this so beautifully is in Chicago. Like, when I
Mm-hmm.
moved to Chicago, I'm an East Coast girl. I'm from Maryland. Shout out to people from Maryland, the DMV. But people can be kind of like to themselves. People can be pretentious. People will help you, but it takes a little bit longer for people to warm up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Being in Chicago, which is like, a big city, it's like a city of neighborhoods. So these communities are very tight knit. Everybody knows everybody. People help each other. They support each other's businesses. Like, I have never been in a community where I've seen Black people work together, support each other with no reservation.
Oh,
Like,
interesting. Wow.
it's beautiful. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think about that, like, that is like one of the cultural values that stick with us, and we should be able to build on that. On the other hand, there are internal issues within our community. There are
Mm-hmm.
things that we have to address and things that we have to work on.
Mm-hmm.
In our families are complex, and there are, intergenerational trauma. There can
Yeah.
be, unhealthy patterns of being with one another and loving one another and supporting one another, or not, or the opposite of all those things. And I think that now what I'm seeing with Black women is a willingness to look at our family histories and look at generational patterns and how
Mm-hmm.
that's affecting us today in unconscious and conscious ways.
Yeah.
It is very interesting, for people who are interested in like genealogy or oral history.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of the things that I do in my family is oral history. So I record the stories of people who are elders in my family.
Oh wow.
Um, Yeah,
That's
yeah. I started
amazing.
with my great aunt. I'm starting with my grandma. So recording their stories because they're 80, they're in their 90s, so wanting to hold all of their experiences, just from listening to them. But it's
Yeah.
amazing when you talk to elders, when you talk to other generations about the things that you're doing that are connected to them.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
interesting,
Yeah.
whether it's personality, whether it's interest, whether it is like values, um, those things carry from generation to generation. And so can disordered, or how people would say dysfunctional, type of relation patterns. Those things exist as well.
Right.
Really being able to get in tune with that, I think, is very important. And one part that I see is so very powerful about millennial women, about Gen Z women, and I'll give a little bit of credit to Gen X, is that people are like, we gonna stop the generational curses. It stopped now. We ain't going another generation. We gonna get it right. Whenever you are going to break a generational pattern,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be much harder for you,
Yes.
because you're trying to set the next generation off right, and you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to counter some of those things that held you or your previous generations back, the barrier breakers. Like, I think about my grandma. She grew up in segregated DC. People forget DC was segregated. She was a part of the barrier breaker generation, that Martin Luther King generation, the barrier breakers. So that like having to go through those things, just really shapes you. And so, like, the generational patterns, they what they did as barrier breakers set us up to where we are right now, and how hard it was for
That's true.
all of our ancestors, all of those people living and those who passed away, to actually break through to create a better life for another generation. And so when we think about generational patterns for people who are trying to shift the mental health and the well-being of their family and their future lineage, that is the type of that's how hard it may be. That might
Mm.
dedication and consistency and unrelenting, you know, power that you have to put in to make that happen.
I think that's so true. Yeah. And those of us who are put here to be like cycle disruptors in like harmful generational patterns, it is difficult. It is because you're like fighting sometimes people in your own family to move things forward, right, for future generations. So that's real. That is real. Yeah. Um, I do see a comment from the educator saying, yes, I record family history. I have great aunts and uncles. 95, wow, 97, 98. They say I act just like my grandma. Wow. That's so interesting. Like you share like personality traits that we can identify like past generations had as well. Yeah. And just like the whole field of like epigenetics, understanding how trauma is carried through generations. Also, blessings, though, right? Things that we've learned ancestrally that we can tap back into in the current generation. I think that's huge. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Danny, Natural LID says, say that, Camesha. They ancestors set us up for right now. Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Yolanda says, true, I became a quilter. Oh my gosh, not realizing my grandmother and great grandmother were both quilters. Never understood where my passion for it came from. Wow. That's amazing how those gifts can just show up. And we may not even be cognizant of it, right? But doing that history and research into your past can really reveal that to you. That's amazing. I do want to ask about the role of healthy, supportive community and the role that it plays in improving mental health outcomes for Black women specifically.
I think that Black women in the mental health space, people such as you, Marissa, I mean, there are so many platforms where Black women are like, we're going to get this mental health together. We're going to get
Yes.
this healing together. To think about where I started in this work, um, almost 10 years ago, and to see where it is now, like, Black women have stepped up to the plate, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to focus on our well-being. We're going to focus on our healing. I think it's just amazing. And people, I mean, in so many different ways, and it's not all the same, whether it's through the arts, whether it's through, I would say like community support, mutual aid.
Mm-hmm.
It can be through YouTube channels, right? Like this
Yeah.
platform, building community,
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, organizations, businesses, directories. I mean, there are so many creative ways that Black women are creating supportive spaces for healing,
Yeah.
and it's so authentic. I think it's geared towards us unapologetically. Um, like for me, I am someone who support people definitely outside of the Black community, but there's a different level of devotion that I have to my own community, and I see that so much in the mental health space with Black women. And I think we're just so incredibly creative in how we're going to approach what
Yeah.
healing looks like
Mm-hmm.
in for us individually and then also collectively. So I think we're doing a really, really great job. I know there are so many negative stereotypes that still persist about Black women not working together in competition and, all those kind of negative things. And those things do
Mm-hmm.
exist. I'm not going to say they don't
Right.
exist, but I think it's overhyped. It doesn't pale in comparison to the opposite, like what
Right.
you're doing,
That's
like
true.
what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing, what some of these women who are watching your video are doing. Like I think that's way more than
Yeah.
the negative stuff that people are putting
I
online,
agree.
and all
I
over the place.
agree. Yeah, and just seeing like Black women social workers, especially like just take social work in a completely different direction than how grad school felt, because grad school was extremely traumatizing to me, right? Being at a PWI, predominantly white institution, but seeing the way that you can actually like come back to the roots of healing prior to even things like colonization and really like use those for community healing. I think that's so powerful. And just to see that represented with Black women social workers, especially, has been inspiring to me. So, yeah, I agree with that. I do see a comment from Secret saying, what if your parents not unpacking their trauma is okay for them to cope, but they do not realize their trauma is affecting how they treat their adult children and how we're experiencing them? If you had
Mhm.
anything to respond or say to that.
Yeah, that actually comes up quite often where you may be ready to heal and do things differently, but other people in your family system are not. And
Yeah.
so the question becomes, how can I exist in a relationship if you want to with that family member, but also preserve my own well-being? So a lot of
Mm,
talk, like if we think about Nedra Tawab talking about boundaries, setting boundaries, or how to break free from toxic family dynamics. I think reading books like that and being able to know, and it's very challenging because we feel a level of like obligation to our family,
mm-hmm.
and it's not
Yeah.
a bad thing, but sometimes that obligation can make us stay in a particular type of relationship with our family that may be harming us.
Right.
So I find that to be a really big struggle for Black women. Is like, my family, they're okay with this, but it's affecting me and it's affecting other loved ones. And I think it is really on an individual basis of how to particularly approach that. But the first thing is really trying to figure out how you want to be in relationship with them, what you're willing to accept, what you're not willing to accept. And you can love people from a distance, you can love people from an
Mm-hmm.
arm's length,
True.
um, and that's okay, and that is okay. Also, another thing that is not talked about is the mother-daughter relationship and the
Yeah.
father-daughter relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
how both equally but in different ways impact Black women over time. And so I think that could be also something interesting for you all to look up, because more people are beginning to talk about mother daughter issues, because stereotypically in the Black community, it's always the dad that did something wrong. It's not talked about the mother,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how that
Right.
relationship can also be a challenge for some people. And there is more research coming out talking about how those relationships differ and what women may need or girls may need that is different for both of those relationships. So, and what they need to be able to have a healthy sense of self throughout
Right.
their life. So.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And that just brought up Roshni Cope, her channel Glamazini. She does a lot of videos on healing the mother wound because, like you said, that's
Mhm.
kind of a new topic to discuss out loud. But yeah, that's huge. So yeah, please subscribe to Glamazini's channel as well. She has so much great content on healing from that. Yes. And I do want to ask, as we kind of pivot to barriers, barriers that exist to Black women being able to access mental health care, and then what work do you think needs to be done to eliminate these barriers?
Mhm. There are several barriers. I'll start with the, I would say the top two. One, what I found in my work with Sista Afya. So I started off with a private practice, which a private practice is a mental health business that sees people who can either pay out of pocket or who may have commercial insurance. And there's a team of therapists that can provide that care. And we were offering like rates that were like a lot lower than other private practices to make mental health care more accessible for Black women. And
Mm-hmm.
it got to a point where it's like, we can't survive as a business if we continue to do that, but we still need to make it accessible. So I launched Sista Afya Community Care, which is a nonprofit that I have that provides free mental health care to Black women and
That's
girls
amazing.
in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And um, that was literally out of a response to the community. It wasn't because, like, we just needed, we just want to do this. It was literally listening to Black women who said, we want to come to you for therapy. We're ready to heal. We're ready
Mm-hmm.
to get mental health care, but I can't pay for it. I don't have the
Mm-hmm.
means to pay for
Mm-hmm.
it. And so, by being able to break that barrier, and particularly my nonprofit and my team specializes in working with women who have multiple barriers to care. So, that can be income related, that can be having a therapist that's accessible in their community, having a Black woman therapist. Um, we really like work with women who have a lot of times even been shut out of the mental health conversation that a lot of Black women are in, who may be more privileged or who may be able to more easily access these services. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, it's, therapy is still kind of a middle class thing, where middle
Mm-hmm.
class or upper middle class people have the
Yeah.
luxury to afford it. But there isn't a lot of conversation about our sisters who are on the margins,
Yes.
who are not being served, who are not being cared for. And so I really just want to highlight that, because it has to be talked about even within our own spaces of healing, that
Mm-hmm.
we have other women who can't even get into the space that we're in. So that's one of the barriers. So cost. The other part is finding a therapist of color if that is what you would like to have. Black, this Black therapists make up like 4% of all therapists. In social work, we're a little bit more represented. We're like maybe 20% of the social work field. So we're doing a little bit better. But if
Mm-hmm.
you think about that, I mean, that's not even comparable to our national population, so there just aren't enough Black therapists nationwide. Like, I'm in Chicago, big city, a lot of Black people. So we have more Black therapists. But if I go to Little Rock, Arkansas, are there any Black women therapists really there that I can access? So I think that is another barrier as well. And another thing that is not talked about are gaps in treatment. So there are
Mm,
Black women who go to therapy or may have had a touch with the mental health care system, but because of a maybe a poor experience, or maybe because of just other life circumstances, they went without care for a particular amount of time and their mental health got worse. And so that is another thing that isn't talked about. Like, if you have like more intense or serious mental health concerns, how having gaps in treatment can really negatively impact you. And that is something that I see that isn't really talked about a lot. So
mm.
those are, I would say, like the top three factors that I see that impact accessibility.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I think cost is huge, right? Even being in like entering the mental health space in a different capacity now, really like coming to terms with that, right? Not everyone can afford the services that I'm offering. And so to build a nonprofit like that to provide mental health services for free, I think that's huge and something that we need. So thank you. Yes. Yes. Yeah, advice. Advice that you would give to Black women who are struggling with their mental health, as we see everything happening around us, right? Very turbulent environment at the moment, but are hesitant to seek help. Any advice that you would give to them?
Mhm. A couple things. So, one, I would say being as clear as you can be about what you need support with. So, sometimes people think that all therapists can support all things, and that's not true. So, being able to identify, okay, I think I'm dealing with depression. Okay, I got that. Now, how do I find a therapist that can help me with depression? So that
Mm-hmm.
is the first step, is to identify, and then I think trying to locate someone who fits what you need. Therapists usually have a narrative or a profile about their experience and how they can help you. So those two things I would say are really important. The other part you mentioned about being in turbulent times, or people are struggling and what to do. One thing that I learned with mental health first aid, so I was certified to be a mental health first aid trainer, so I trained people um, of how to respond to mental health crises. And one of the things that they said is the longer you go without treatment, the longer it will take to recover. And so, a lot of times, what I see in the Black community is people waiting too long to actually step
Mm.
out there and get mental health treatment. And there are a lot of factors that can impact that, but I think if we could get more into an early intervention in a preventative space, then waiting as long as I see people waiting, like we've seen people like at my business that they were experiencing symptoms for 2 years and didn't get any help. And so by the
Wow.
time they get to us, they're in
Hmm.
crisis. So
Right.
I want people to recognize that you don't have to be in crisis to get mental health care. It doesn't have to be at the worst. Like, if you're starting to see those shifts and those changes, go ahead and reach out now. And there's directories like
Mm.
Therapy for Black Girls, there's Black Female Therapists, there's Psychology Today, there's community based organizations. We have 988, where you can call a national hotline to find out what resources may be in your area. In Chicago, we have 311. We also have a NAMI helpline so that you can call to
Hmm.
figure out if you can't um, access some of these therapists on this directories, that where are the organizations that provide these free services so I can get care. Um,
Mm.
so I would say really just don't delay. Please, please, please don't delay. Even for myself, my own mental health journey, I'm a mental illness survivor. And if I would have gotten help, I think even 6 months to maybe a year before I got into crisis, it probably wouldn't have escalated to what it escalated to, in terms of having more challenges with my mental health that impacted my life. So I am
Right.
like literally a living witness of, if you don't get help soon, what can happen. And thank God I
Mm.
have come out of all of that. I am in a wonderful space with my mental health, like just great. And I also reflect on what I could have done differently. And so that's one thing that I really want to encourage people to do if they find themselves struggling.
Right. Right. I think that's huge. Right. Don't wait. Don't wait. Because a lot of us, again, with Superwoman syndrome, we can just take on even more things and go even deeper into whatever we're experiencing that may have been mild at the start. But now, since we've like neglected ourselves in this process, right, it gets even deeper when you do decide to seek treatment. So yeah, I think that's great advice. Seek treatment early. Yeah. I see a comment from Shanna. Hello, I'm in therapy for depression and anxiety. I waited so long and distracted myself. When I didn't have a distraction anymore, everything caught up. Ooh, and flooded my senses. I started to self harm. Sending you so much love. Thank you for sharing that. Um, and yeah, Kamisha, if you want to share anything about like when we do have a moment to stop and rest, if we've been in survival mode all this time, sometimes those feelings just come like flooding back, right, all at one time. And so, how we can deal with that, cope with that, if we have gotten to that place, maybe we haven't sought treatment in the early stages, how we can navigate really putting ourselves first in that moment and deciding to seek therapy.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Shanna, for sharing your experience. And I appreciate your honesty about like, I knew that I was struggling and I tried to maybe distract myself or not address it. And a lot of people, yes, you're better now. Love that. And so you are not alone. So many people have done that. And so I
Mm-hmm.
definitely want people to know that if you have experienced like delaying or not seeking help, that is something that so many people are struggling with. The other thing that I will say is that you are if you have those really strong emotions and feelings that come up, I would definitely saying like pausing and kind of like noticing what's happening and what you can do to get you back to equilibrium, if
Mm.
you have a
Mhm.
sense of what equilibrium would look like for you.
Right.
So kind of
Mm.
back to what I talked about earlier, the basics. How can I get back to that, or creating a sense of like peace? And yes,
Mm-hmm.
what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, safety,
Mm-hmm.
um, is I think one of the first things to do. And sometimes I would say one of the powerful things about us is like a lot of Black women have really good sister friends or girlfriends,
Mm-hmm.
and if you have one that's really, really supportive, I would encourage like talking to them and having them also be hand in hand with you during this journey. I
Mm-hmm.
have a friend who recently had a mental health crisis, and that was actually very similar to mine. And, every week I would just call to just check up on her, provide resources, just be a listening ear or a sounding board for her in that moment, and for what she's experiencing. And that is really, really healing. So I also encourage people who are experiencing a lot of floods of emotions, a lot of intensity, like in addition to getting back to equilibrium, for looking for a therapist, is having someone who can support you throughout your journey, because that's really what you're going to need. Um, some people, they can do everything individually, but for most of us, it's like a community that's going to help us
Yeah,
and to support us.
that's so true. That is so true. Yeah, yeah. Being that person to support other people if you see them struggling. right? Reaching out, checking up on them, I think that's huge, right? Because it could be the one, like the people who maybe like you can't tell from the outside, but if you notice like even slight changes in behavior, just checking in on them, that can be huge. That can be huge. Yeah, absolutely. Scrolling through the comments, see a comment from Marissa. Yes, was the term said mental health first aid? That was new to me, and I want to look into that more.
Yes, so that's correct. Mental Health First Aid is a national certification program that trains everyday people. You don't have to be a mental health professional. You just have to be an advocate and someone who wants to help others. So the training and my organization offers it for free. So we actually have one
Mm.
coming up for youth mental health first aid, and it's at sistaafya.com/services. Yes. We have one coming up. So if you want to learn more now, it is an 8-hour certification. So you got to put in some work, but, but it's amazing, and we offer it for free, and it's virtual. So if you want to just check
Ooh,
it out and
virtual.
learn more about it, but we've had people from all over the world who've engaged in the training that we offer. We had people from Egypt, people from Canada, people from, I mean, all over the world, because it's virtual, that are able to get this certification, because it takes all of us to in stigma. It takes all of us to make our communities well. And so, what mental
Mhm.
health first aid does is it teaches you the basics about what to look out for in terms of mental health symptoms, crises, and how to support and help people at various stages of where they may be at in their mental health journey. So I really encourage you all to look into that. And we offer the free training monthly. So we switch between adult and youth every other month. But
Wow.
if you have any more questions, like, please reach out, please like message or DM me. And you put, is it in the weekend? Yes, actually, Ami, our mental health first aid trainer, is facilitating it on the weekends.
Oh,
So,
wow. Oh, there you
yep.
go. That's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. I've never heard of that term myself, mental health first aid. Wow. Wow. And that can be a key way to support your community, right? If people are in crisis, which is one of the things I've talked about on my channel. Like, we're often given the advice to just dial 911 if someone is in mental health crisis. And we've seen, unfortunately, the way that that has played out, especially for Black people having a mental health crisis. So the more that we're able to be trained as community members on signs and symptoms to look out for, how to support folks in crisis, I think that's huge. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes. Oh, Carol says from South Africa, I would love to do the course. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Virtual course worldwide. I do want to ask for those of us who have negative experiences with mental health professionals in the past, how can we interview a potential therapist to see if they're a good fit? And I do want to read a comment first from Leslyn. I wish it was that simple. I think this was in reference to therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't fit everyone. So, just anything you like to share around people who have had negative experiences in the past, and how you can move forward maybe with a different therapist in a different setting to really get the care that you need.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. Unfortunately, I wish everyone had a great experience with their therapist, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it can be a mismatch of them. You because the therapeutic relationship is very personal, and so someone
Mm-hmm.
may have the skills, but they may not connect with you in the way that you need, and that's okay. And then there are some therapists that are doing poor practice as well. And that's like a whole nother, issue. But if you have experienced a negative experience with a therapist, I would encourage you to write down what what was a challenge for you, and then the opposite, like what would you like to see your therapist provide. So say, for example, if you had a therapist that was very direct, and some therapists are like that, they're like straight, there's
Mm-hmm.
particular therapeutic modalities where people are very direct. Um,
Yes.
but maybe what you need is a little bit more compassion or listening, or understanding, that might be something that would be better for you. And then there's some people who are like, tell me, help me, whatever it is. Everybody has their own way in which they receive therapy and receive information and support. So write down what what went wrong, what didn't go well, and then the opposite. What is it that you actually need that's different than what you experienced? The other thing that people have talked about is Black women therapists girlfriending their clients, which means that no,
Oh.
homegirling
Mm-hmm.
their
Mm-hmm.
clients, where they're coming to therapy to work on very specific things, but they're feeling like it's a conversation between their girlfriends and not really getting actual help. So that's another issue that has come up with people wanting a Black women therapist, but then there are some Black women therapists who are becoming or treating a therapeutic relationship as more of a friendship than actual, like, we're going to work on these specific issues and progress in treatment. So that's another thing, just to put on people's radars if they don't know about it, to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I would say to make note of is what you specifically need support with. For a lot of people, sometimes it can be hard to articulate what it is that you need support with your mental health. But the more you can get clear on that when you're looking for a therapist or a new therapist, that will help you. But it's hard for a lot of first timers who go into therapy and didn't have a good experience because they may struggle to actually identify what they need support with.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if for example, you have like, for example, Lisa Butler, she's a therapist in Chicago, and she specializes in trauma and mother-daughter relationship challenges. And so, like, when
Mm-hmm.
you go to her website, she makes it very clear that that's her specialty. And with that specialty, that is like a call out to say, oh, that's what I need. That's exactly what I need. So if you can find, like, what are those really specific issues that you're struggling with, and a therapist that can actually respond to that, that can also be helpful in finding a better match.
Mm. That is such helpful advice. Yeah. And I found that for me, right, it took a few times, a few tries of trying someone that like actually fit with me as a therapist. Like you said, do you prefer conversational, direct, like making a list of this? And I think like therapists are also people, right? So just because you have the letters, you have the education, doesn't mean that you're not bringing your own personal things into a therapeutic setting. So that's something to be cognizant of as well. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Changes you like to see in the mental health field that would better support Black women and Black women's mental health.
I would love to see an expansion of community mental health.
Mm, mhm,
I love community mental health, and I think that it could really transform mental health for Black women in the Black community. And I'm going to tell you why. One is because it already embodies one of our cultural values, which is collectivism, which is community.
mhm, mhm,
Um, Community mental health centers or community based organizations can really pretty much serve anybody, regardless of their income, regardless of their their background. So the accessibility is there, and also the wide range of programming. A lot of, like, for example, with Sista Afya, we don't just provide free individual therapy. We have wellness classes, we have groups, we have workshops, we do training. So we do retreats, we do so many different things, clinical case management, peer support. These are some of the services that you can get at a lot of community-based organizations, and it's a very untapped resource. Like, we're just starting to see more Black mental health organizations emerge, which is wonderful. But I think if we can get
mm,
more in the community based space, it can really open accessibility
Mm.
So that is one thing. And of course, I'm a little bit biased because I love community mental health, but I think it is very overlooked. A lot of people mainly focus on the private practice, individual practitioners, like people getting access that way. But I think
Mm-hmm.
with the state of where our community is at, we could benefit from more community-based organizations, clinics, etc. Um, so that's one thing that I would like to see change. Um, what else would I like to see change? Of course, we always need more investment. But one of the things that
Mm-hmm.
that I think we do well that we could build on is creating our own sustainable mental wellness communities, our own ecosystems of care that regardless if we get funding or not, or if the money is there or not for the client or the practitioner, that we can take care of each other. I am different in my space because I'm not waiting on someone to do it. I believe
Mm-hmm.
that our like people like you, Marissa, I mean, we have so much talent in our community, so much
Yeah, we
skill,
do.
so much
Mm-hmm.
wisdom, so much knowledge.
Yeah.
And we are the examples of making a way out of no way. If anybody is an
Mm-hmm.
example, it's us. And so
Yes.
I think we can
Mm-hmm.
translate that into mental health and healing. Um, the and I think that's like one of our superpowers. It just takes coordination and collaboration. But
Yeah.
I think that that is something that I would like to see change. Trying to think of anything else. Also, just removing the classism out of mental health care. I talked about it earlier,
Mm.
where there
Mm-hmm.
is still classism, even with Black women who are, a lot of the women who are talking about, I'm going to therapy, I'm going to therapy, I'm going to therapy, are not women who are on the margins. And I do think there is still an insidious um,
Wow. That's
classism within
true.
healing
Mm-hmm.
spaces. I would say even in wellness spaces as well. So I want to see that removed.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's not, we're not really changing. We're not really changing the mental health. We're making it accessible for some, but not
Mm.
accessible and achievable for all of us. Um, so yeah, I would like to see that change. I'm trying to think of anything else. Um, I think that we got the creative thing down packed. I think we're gonna find a way. We're gonna make it approachable. We're gonna make it fit what we need. So I think we're rocking in that department. But
Mm-hmm.
oh, in research, I would like to see more Black women creating different models of care, doing more research on ways that we can implement that to inform. Because a lot of therapists, what I've noticed, they're like, okay, I want to provide therapy for Black women, but what are the tools, like how, Marissa, we're taught all these interventions, CBT, and all these other things. What if we
Mm-hmm.
had like a chest of those things specifically designed for Black women? So I really would love to see
Mm-hmm.
creating different interventions or models of care that specifically have us in mind. I think that would be just so powerful. Because I believe it's important. It's important
Yeah,
to that.
I agree. In all those that you laid out, right, the classism within the mental health space, and I see comments here. Leslie says, I agree with this. I'm very concerned that mental health care is starting to be out of reach for the community financially. Many complain that they can't afford care. Yeah, that's real. And I don't think that's talked about enough, right? Because therapy is not always affordable, right? I know for me, I use my employee assistance program, right, to start therapy, and that gave me 8 free sessions. But after that, I couldn't afford it because it went up to like 300 plus per session. So that has to be talked about, right? The cost and how that makes it inaccessible. Yeah, that's so important. That's so important. And Yolanda says, yes, community based organizations are a must. Our community is really struggling right now. Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And I agree with Yolanda about mental health care in schools and colleges.
Mm-hmm.
Um, our girls, like we're just talking about Black women. We haven't even scratched the surface on Black girls. If you
Mm-hmm.
think it's rough for Black women, you better wake up. It's rough for Black girls.
Yeah.
Um, we started serving girls this year, and we realized that there is not enough attention on Black girls' mental health and enough places that they can go. I love
Mm-hmm.
Black Girls Smile. I would love you all to look them up. They are an organization that focuses on Black girls' mental health, and they're national. Lauren
Wow.
Carson is the founder, but we need like 20 Black girls. We need 100 Black Girl Smiles for what
Mm-hmm.
Black girls are going through. Black girls are having some of the highest suicide rates, very
Yes.
high rates of anxiety and depression. So I also
Mm-hmm.
want to say we got to wake up for the girls. We have to wake up for the next generation. Us
Yeah.
as adults, we have our way. We can do more about it as adults. But these girls, like, it breaks my heart, the stories that I hear. Is
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll stop there. But I think we really have to. That has to change as well. We got to start focusing more on the youth, because
Mm-hmm.
it is a serious crisis out there for their mental health right now.
I agree. I agree. And yeah, I was just watching I think it was PBS did a few documentaries on like mental health when it comes to Black youth, and just like you said, like suicide rates are just astronomical. And that's kind of where my heart is because of all the things that I experienced as a Black girl growing up, right? Like mental health, how do we get this to younger people before they even reach adulthood? Because we know that like adolescence, even coming up, and the fact that our brains are like halfway, more than halfway developed before the age of 9, what are we experiencing during those years that are now impacting us during adulthood? um,
Mm.
so yeah, yeah, that's so important. That's so important. How do we reach the youth? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Leslie says, I have been noticing that as well. We talk about South Korea, but it's becoming an epidemic in our community. Yeah.
It's here. It
Yeah.
ain't becoming. It's here. It's
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
It's here.
Yeah.
It's just how I think, Leslie, you were saying earlier, it's hiding in plain sight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 As we are winding down, I know that we're a little bit over time, but any tips that you'd like to share about how to protect your mental health in a stressful environment, in a stressful country, as we see, how can we lean into self preservation instead of self sacrifice as Black women?
Hmm. Um, hmm. We are in a turbulent time. We are dealing with war. We are dealing with
Yeah.
inflation. We are in a recession. If people have not noticed, don't listen to what the media is telling you. We are in a recession. We are
Mm-hmm.
dealing with political turmoil, challenges within our community. I mean, there's so many things that are going on, and it's very overwhelming. Like, even as I'm talking about, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But tips that I can provide you is focusing on what you can have the power to control that is healthy for you. Sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
like being on social media, being in tune with the news, being those things may be important, but may not be good for you. So I really want Black women to notice what could be either triggering or just very difficult and harmful, and protecting yourselves from that. It doesn't mean that you don't care. It just means that for you to be able to kind of function without a feeling of chaos, that kind of putting some distance between those things, I think, are really, really important for our mental health. Like, a couple therapists on my team shared that clients are already in therapy talking about the election and worrying
Wow.
about it from a mental
Mm-hmm.
health standpoint. When the murder of George Floyd happened, every session I had that week, all the Black women were talking about it. So these
Yeah.
social issues do affect our mental health. So finding ways that you can be engaged, and finding ways to create distance if there can be challenges with consuming that information. Um, Other tips that I would recommend is creating really a daily routine and regimen for healing for you. So for
Mm.
me, I have my little Apple timer goes off when it says it's time for bed. So that means I shut everything off, I drop everything. It's time for me to go to bed. I dedicate myself to cooking a couple of times a week. I dedicate myself for going on walks with my husband a couple days per week, going to Orange Theory. Um,
Mhm.
like last week, we went to a concert in the park. Like building in joy and building in self care and
Right.
collective care into your daily life is accessible for everyone, no matter like what that may look like for you. I don't believe there's really any, constraints on what you can do, but I believe that that is how we sustain ourselves, because there's always going to be these things going on in the world and in
That's
our
very true.
environment that we're not able to always do something about. But what we can do is nourish ourselves. We can love ourselves. We can care for ourselves. We can allow other people to care for us.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the most powerful things that we can have in this moment. And then lastly, if you are experiencing a lot of stressors or distress, go ahead and seek help. See what happens. It could
Mhm.
be a support to you, and that's like a tip that I would recommend. And tuning into Marissa Price,
Mr.
platform
Afya.
such as this to build community and
Mhm.
to learn and to grow, feeding yourselves with positivity and support.
Mm. I love that. I love that. Yeah, because we can't control a lot what's going on around us. I see a comment from Sharon Dukes. That's very true. It has hurt me a lot not being able to pull away from social media lecturing genocides, all the chaos. Yeah, it's a lot of chaos. And like Camesha said, like you have to protect yourself in your psyche in the midst of all of this that we see going on. It's very important to do that. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I do see a comment here from Yola XOXO. I'm just getting here, but not sure if alternative medicine has come up and how important it is to mental health as well in our community too. Any thoughts about medicines, I guess, as an alternative to Western medicine when
Mhm.
it comes to therapy settings?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Western medicine has its limits,
Mhm.
and it's not the standard. There are so many modalities that you can heal in that are outside of the Western context that we are in right now. And it's a matter of being educated about those things and finding the the best resource for you for that,
Mm.
for alternative medicine. Because
Mhm.
with and it's similar to Western medicine as well. They have a whole bunch of people who are on the interwebs, or I mean, who are sharing information that you still kind of need to check. um a lot of, I know, for sometimes for Black people to feel like they're in more control of their well-being, they may DIY, like do it myself, or pick up all these different things, which is fine because it's a part of exploration. But just making sure with anything, with Western medicine, with therapy, like everything, learn about it, try to educate yourself, looking for the right people and the right resources for people who can really help you. And just thinking about, therapy is not sitting in a chair across from somebody. There are many ways that you can experience therapy.
Mhm.
Um, I know some people can have different feelings about faith in the particular of the church context, but I think that for me, what I've heard from previous generations, like my grandmother, great grandmother, that the women who were in their church were like their support group. Honestly,
Mm.
they showed up
Mhm.
to their children's events. It was a circle of care, a circle of love, and that was therapeutic. So I also want us to get outside of like therapy has to be me talking to someone in a chair. There can be so many things that are categorized with therapy, with it being helpful and being therapeutic. So I really want people to just get expansive, get
Very
open.
expansive.
Yes,
Hmm.
in what can be therapeutic for you.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And I'll just shout out Alicia Renese, who created the garden. And that really helped me, like that community of Black women rediscovering our creativity. Like that was a therapy resource for me. It wasn't like traditional therapy, but just being around other Black women creatives. It helped me like write a book, which was always my dream, right? And kind of process and heal from the toxic job experience I had. So therapy doesn't have to look like you said, you're sitting across from someone very rigid, stoic, in a chair. It can be like group settings, right? Anything that really gives you the medicine that you need. I think that's the key. Yeah. Yeah. That's how to shout you out. Yes. Yes. But I do see a question from Yvette Boone. Is there a test to help you figure out what you're looking for in a therapist or what help you need?
Um, I'm not knowledgeable of one. However, for I think like some therapeutic directories may like I think Alma and growth therapy, there are some of these like kind of where you can easily find a therapist. They just ask you a questionnaire like what do you know, what are you struggling with? What do you need help with? And then sometimes they can narrow it down. Um, but that's all I know of currently in terms of what exists. But that is something, Yvette, that I think we need to create because people need assistance with trying to figure out what type of therapist they need and what would really help them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yes, hope and victory. Hey, hope and victory. Circle of love. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very welcome. Yeah. And Natural LID Danny says yes to seeking alternative modalities. Yeah, yeah. And Danny does a lot of work on her channel around aromatherapy as a certified aromatherapist who's also a social worker, Black woman social worker. So, yes, please check out Danny's channel as well. Yes. All right. As we're wrapping up, I do want to ask how people can continue to support you and follow your journey online and any offerings that you like to share with us.
Yes. So thank you again, Marissa, for having me. I really have enjoyed this conversation and this community. I have loved all of you all's comments and questions. There are several ways that you can stay connected to me or to learn more about my work and the community that I am growing here in Chicago. So, if you are interested if you're in Illinois and you're interested in therapy, you can go to, if you're looking for free therapy first, I'm going to put our website in the my nonprofit website in the chat. Um, if if you're looking for free therapy and also resources as well in terms of groups, classes, workshops, like everything is there. So I would offer that first. And we do have, I know some of you are in different areas of the country. We do offer virtual classes and workshops. Like we have a meditation and journaling virtual workshop. It's called, I think, Embracing You. We have another one focused on fall and empowering Black women. So even though you may be in other areas, we're hybrid. So we offer some things virtually and then some things in person. I am very active on LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn, you can definitely follow me, connect with me. I post like every other day on LinkedIn. And I also have my Moving Beyond Burnout series. So if you're someone who's struggling with stress and burnout, every Thursday at 12, I go live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram to discuss various topics relating to burnout. So like today, I discussed releasing control and how like over being in control can actually cause a lot of stress and it can prevent us
Mm-hmm.
from getting free. So
Yes.
I talk about so
That's
many
what I
different
know.
things. Thank you for sharing. And then, so yeah, so moving beyond burnout. So follow the YouTube channel, my website, LinkedIn. Those are the best ways to stay in contact or connection with me. And feel free. I'll also put my, oh, I don't know if I'll put my email in the chat. It's fine. If it's spam, I know what to do. Um, and then if you have any questions or any thoughts, like feel free to email me and, I will respond. If I don't know the answer to the question, I'll let you know and try to direct you to the most appropriate support and resources. So I think that's it. I think, and then Instagram. So Sista Afya on Instagram is very active. I don't post there much, but my social media manager always has some stuff cooking on there. So if you're on Instagram, you can definitely follow everything that my organization has going on there.
Yay. Yes. Well, as we're wrapping up, I want to first thank y'all so much for putting everything in the chat that you put in there. As we learn from each other in a kind of community healing style on this channel. So I appreciate that. I do want to ask Camesha if there's one takeaway or closing thought that you'd like to share before we end tonight.
Okay, closing thoughts. One, I want to encourage Black women to keep doing what you're doing. Like you all being here, watching this live, engaging in community, this is the best of us. So keep doing what you're doing what's working, doing what can support your healing journey, no matter how big or how small. Like it's something and it's a part of your growth and it's a part of your journey. So that is something that I want to leave you all with. And then, as always, I've said it many times, if you are struggling, you are not alone. Please reach out for some form of care and support. I just see so many Black women who have delayed their healing, and you do
Mhm.
not have to. So I want to really encourage you today, if you are in that space, to not delay. You deserve it. Like reach out for care and
You deserve
support.
it.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, Masho, nah, thank you for the great conversation. I signed up for the next mental health first aid session.
Yay.
Wonderful. Yay. That's exciting. Well, yes, with that, I do want to thank y'all for being here. Thank you, Camesha, for being such a lovely guest and sharing everything that you shared with us so generously. As we see mental health becoming an even more like pressing topic, the things that we're experiencing on a daily. But like you said, we have the power to prioritize our care and our wellness, and it's going to become like even more essential, I feel like. And just having these resources, I think, is so powerful. And I will link the resources that Camesha shared with us in the description section. So if you want to take advantage of those, please do. Yeah, YOLO XOXO. Even baby steps count. Yes. Good to
Yep.
see everyone in the chat as well. Have a good night. You too. Thank you for being here. And yes, with that, y'all, until next time, thank y'all for being here. Good to see you too, Leslyn. Yes, I feel so strengthened. Oh, wow. Wow. That's powerful. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome, Danny. Yes, wonderful combo. Thank you. Good night, all, and blessings. You too. You too. Carol, thank you so much for this opportunity. God bless. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. All right, y'all. Until next time, thank y'all so much. Bye.